Hello there, good evening and welcome to this special discussion live in the studio here of MTV. I have with me in studio Mrs. Priyamanik Jan. She's a member of Parliament of the People's Progressive Party and of course former Minister of the Government. We're continuing our discussions on the successful no confidence motion in the National Assembly on the 21st of December 2018. Ms. Manik Jan, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Eddie, for having me here. As you can see, as the days go by, things are developing, and so we feel it's necessary to brief our citizens, both our supporters as well as those who are looking at us to decide if they should support us, because we know not only is it our duty to brief, but we know also that there's a lot of misinformation being peddled that needs to be answered, that needs to be rolled back, and we understand that to be our duty. So I'm very glad to be here with you.
All right, I want to start with a little bit of a history in terms of no confidence motions in Guyana, in the Guyana context. And we all know this is not the first time a no confidence motion is brought to the National Assembly. However, it's the first time it was actually debated and a vote was taken. So I want you to give me a little bit of a background to no confidence motion to put our discussions in context.
Yes, so let's do that quickly. So what happened is we have changed our constitution. Sometime around 1998 to 2002, there was a constitutional reform process happening, and we put into that new constitution, the one that we're using right now, the ability for no confidence motions or an expression of no confidence to be made against the sitting government. And we did that when we were in government. When I say we did that, the nation did that when the PPP Civic was in government. And the whole thinking behind that reform was to allow for people to have more voice, to have more say in the government, against the government, to be able to express themselves during the election cycle. So not only have to wait every 5 years, but during the cycle if they felt they needed to, and so on. So last year, in 2014, well, the most recent talk of no confidence, you would know when the combined opposition parties, the APNU and the AFC, actually they were not APNU then, I think they were PNCR one.
No, they were APNU.
They were APNU then?
And AFC at that time.
Right, so they weren't combined. They were two separate parties, but they enjoyed 33 seats when you combine them together. And the PPP Civic, although in government and had the presidency and the cabinet, had only 32 seats in the National Assembly. And at that time, the combined opposition filed a no confidence motion based on the fact Moses Nagamutu signed that motion. It was seconded by Cathy Hughes. There's so much irony in this. And they said that they were going to bring the PPP Civic government down using their 33 votes. 33 votes. Cathy Hughes seconded that motion. Cathy Hughes is the wife of Nigel Hughes. Let's just remember all that. And what the PPP did was what was constitutionally allowed. The president had given us a period where he thought dialogue may change, that kind of dialogue over disputes kind of attitude may change that feeling that they were going to cut the government in short and have these views of discontent. Perhaps we could answer them. And when that did not happen, he did what the same constitution allows. He prorogued parliament, went to an election almost immediately. He could have delayed that and taken us 2 years to do that. Incidentally, at that time, the government the PPP had the same advice that you might need 34, and we said absolutely not. My own position on that is if there is an expression of confidence, no confidence in a government, it is the government's duty to examine that at the polls. To hold on to elections would be most undemocratic, it would be dictatorial, and I didn't want to be a part of that government. And the president himself at the time said absolutely not. We were not going to delay the elections. Once we found out a dialogue was not going to work, we went to the elections, and the rest is history. Now between then and now, they got a very slim 1-seat majority, a 33-member government, and I say they got very loosely because that is being tested in the courts. It's been taking forever to come up. But the truth is that we weren't sure that they actually got that. But let's say for now, for this discussion, the purposes of this discussion, that they got 33 seats. We had two elections since then, two local government elections, 2016 and 2018. And in both of those elections, they were severely walloped. Particularly in 2018, the PPP got 63% of the vote, of the people who turned out to vote. Now, my friends, it's not only in 2018 that the PPP started hearing how upset people were, but we heard it very distinctly on that campaign trail. People, for the first time in post-independence, we have the highest unemployment rate ever. For the first time since independence. 32,000 jobs were lost, were taken away by this government in the last 3 years. People are starving. Families have chosen which children to send to school and which one to keep home. Can you believe that? Can you believe that in this Guyana, where we had attained universal primary education, every child could go to school, we were heading really furiously towards attaining second. Parents now have to choose which child is the brighter one, which one are going to send to school, because they cannot afford to send them all to school. We saw how ministers started living the big life, the good life, fancy vehicles and several personal assistants and guards and being paid heavily, how they increased their own salaries, they're renting properties at phenomenal figures that they could not pay themselves if they were not ministers. Speaking to people anyhow, not listening to people, snatching from the discipline services their bonuses, forcing teachers the indignity of going onto the streets and marching, and refusing to negotiate a 5-year agreement. They just, you know, like everything that they could have done wrong, they did wrong. And people were very vocal about that on the campaign trail. I mean, I can tell you, people were very clear to me that it wasn't, I mean, look, let's be frank. Which government, having been in opposition, and I want you to consider this, my friends, having been in opposition for 23 years, which government comes in and the situation is ripe for a no confidence to, 1, be filed and 2, be passed? You have to be doing really, really badly and being tone deaf to the cries of people. Now we're hearing all the, oh, we love Guyana, we love Georgetown, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I saw a post about how minimum wage is going to be $450 and you know, these ridiculous claims now. Well, people don't trust you anymore and they want to go to the polls, and that's what they asked us to do. They asked us to file a no confidence motion. Since now we got up one morning and he said, oh, we're going to file this, and we did. We filed that motion, and as you know, one of the government's members, Mr. Charan Das Prasad, voted for.
But before we get to that,
Sure.
I wanted to share something with the public, just a reminder. So I have 3 clips that I want to share, because
Yes.
this is going to put what happened on the 21st of
Into
December
perspective, sure.
into context. So let us take a look at these videos first.
A hue and a cry of a no confidence motion. But I have to tell you, honorable members on the opposite side, bring it on! Bring it on! The APNU AFC has a solid 33. You have an indecisive 32.
Their numbers in the parliament didn't change. They still have 32 seats. And for a no confidence motion to succeed, you need at least 33 seats. So this no confidence motion is being moved by an opposition, by the PPP, by Mr. Jack Deo and company, based on results of the local government elections, and also because they didn't have the majority of the votes to pass it. So they're saying, okay, we are tabling the motion, hoping that one member of the government will vote with them. You can't do guesswork. It is too serious a matter for you to want to remove a government only on guesswork, only on the basis that you...
Let me say this, Mr. Speaker. The defense of a no confidence motion will be at the vote when we're going to vote just now. That is the defense. I want to say in my final remarks, that when we are talking here about having what is called harmony, when we are talking about wanting to have not only at a...
You have 5 minutes remaining.
5 minutes, sorry, thanks. It will be, and to, of course, have our disagreements and issues and matters of principles. We must robustly disagree with each other. But we must know when we shouldn't cross the line. And more, I feel that because of this polarizing atmosphere that we have, that is going to be taken advantage of with a no confidence motion, especially in the context when they are aware that they don't have the numbers, but working on what some magic they feel that somebody over here is going to vote with them, you know. So it is just, it is venturing into the dark, as it were, and hoping that they're going to get somebody from over here, but they're not going to get anybody. People are very sensible.
So what happened there is that you had the now caretaker PM saying that 33 votes needed to pass the motion. You have the now, should I say,
it's not even, it's Amna Ali, it's Ramjatan, it's Nagamutu, it was Brooms, it was Kati, everybody, every single person in the government who spoke on the no confidence motion, not only at the debate, but prior to the debate when they were speaking to their constituents and so on, accepted throughout. I mean, we didn't play that video for you to laugh, for you to see them laughing and now be able to laugh back at them. The purpose of the video is to show you that everybody going into this no confidence motion, from 2014 when they themselves filed the motion, all the way up to the day of the motion, accepted that 33 votes was what was needed to be a majority in the National Assembly, right? And so everybody accepted that. We went into the debate, them all understanding it to be 33 members, as that was needed for majority. One of their members voted against them, and that's how Charandas voted, and I'd like it to be seen like that. Charandas voted, all we had on the floor was a one-liner, that this assembly no longer has confidence in the government. So you couldn't be voting for us, you were voting against the government. And that's what everybody did. The 33 people who voted to say that the assembly no longer had confidence in the government of Guyana. Almost immediately upon that vote taken, the entire cabinet and all the members of parliament at a press briefing conceded that the government had fallen, conceded that they had lost the motion, conceded that and tried to be very gracious and say, we're going to follow the Constitution. Elections will be called within 90 days, because that is what they were bound to do. That's what they said. The following day, on the 22nd, President Granger issued a statement where he said very clearly there is no ground for disorder and unrest, and that the constitutional prescriptions are very clear, and that the government was committed to following all the constitutional prescriptions, and that he would meet with the leader of the opposition, Bar Jagdeo, to discuss matters surrounding elections which needed to be held within 90 days. He conceded that. A set of the ministers all of a sudden loved the citizens of Guyana, and they went to the Stabroek Market Square. They dared not walk around because people would be like, who are you? People don't even know their faces. So they had to go to a specific area where it was naturally busy, and they spoke to their cameras, NCN and cameras that are friendly to the government, and they all said, without fail, Catherine Hughes, Kemraj Ramjatan, Simona Brooms, Nicolette Henry, what's his name? Nagamutu, oh dare me, how could I mix him up? Nagamutu, Ramjatan, just Valda Lawrence, Annette Ferguson, they all said that they accept that they have fallen. Worry not, Guyana, we're going to go back to the elections, we're going to beat the PPP. So everybody accepted that. And then now, when it started sinking in, that what that really meant going back to the PPP, to the elections, to ask people who they had ignored, young people who could no longer speak in this government, in this country, soldiers and policemen who you treated so badly throughout the time that you were there. Teachers who you forced to go and force them to embarrass you before you can pay them. Ordinary housewives who could no longer eat 3 meals a day. 7,000 cane cutters. These people now when you realize and it hit them that these are the people we're now going to be asking to vote for us again. And when it hit them that their good life, which was reserved for that very narrow, very small elite few in the government, the fancy cars and the houses and the other corrupt activities that gave them a life that they could not have imagined outside of government. When it hit them that that was what is about to happen, they started coming up with a whole set of voodoo, a whole set of mathematics. The same Nigel Hughes who sat at a table 2 years ago and told the press, and that video is around for people to see, if they can find it they should pull it up, that we're going to bring the PPP government down on our 33 votes, now came up with this thing that 34 was needed, which we believe is just such a bogus argument. We don't even need to tell the people that. The people of Guyana understand that. And then they came up with a couple of others. So there's the 34 is a majority, not 33. And then that Charandas is a dual citizen. Well, you took Charandas to the National Assembly. You relied on his vote for the last 3 years to call it a majority. You would have been relying on his vote that very night. Although he's a dual citizen. They were relying on that dual citizen's vote that very night. And they knew that. And then that he couldn't have voted against them without first saying that to the speaker. All of these arguments are dead in the water. They are as ridiculous in law and in logic as they sound to your ear, Guyanese. Because I know you're there wondering, what the hell are they telling us about 34 is what is bigger than 32? How come 33? I know you're thinking those. You know that 33 is bigger. They are ridiculous anywhere, in court, in the parliament, anywhere, as they are to you in your home at your breakfast table. And so the speaker today rightly ruled. It came up today. They had this unreasonable expectation and wrote the speaker. That is how desperate they have become. They wrote Dr. Scotland. Now, this is a PhD speaker. They wrote Dr. Scotland and said, we want you to reverse your decision. That is the length they're willing to go to. We want you to reverse your decision that the whole world saw on the 21st, that the Prime Minister accepted and the Cabinet and the Parliament members accepted on the night of the 21st, that the President accepted on the day of the 22nd, that all the ministers accepted again on the 22nd. They want the Speaker to reverse that decision and say that he made a mistake somehow or the other. Well, the Honorable Speaker ruled today, and that's what we're talking about. He ruled today that there are circumstances where I may be persuaded to revisit a ruling I made, but this is not one of them. And so he declined to revisit or review the Assembly's decision that there was no confidence in the government of Guyana, and he just simply declined to jurisdiction to do that. Now, that could point to the level of desperation that the government is in right now.
All right, I want to take you, we've gone through what happened on that evening, the activities after, and in terms of the grounds that they're, but that I don't think, like you rightly said, will really hold any water. But
I don't want to emphasize the dishonesty and the deception of those grounds. The same people, not different people. It's not like, they didn't have the benefit of Nigel Hughes's view back then in 2014, or they didn't have the benefit of his view the day before they carried this thing. His wife sits in the cabinet. These are people who are dishonest. They're prepared. If they could come now and tell you something, they told this nation, they told the world something on the night of the 21st, on the day of the 22nd, from the president, no less a person than the president, prime minister, all the ministers. And now they're coming to say, don't believe us then. We have a new story for you. Here is the new story. How could you trust them? Well, how do you trust somebody like that?
The Attorney General, I think, as well, somehow now he's saying that, well, he knew about this thing all the time, but he didn't
Yeah.
want to say anything. So, you know,
Well,
all
again, that
these-
is as ridiculous generally everywhere as it sounds to you.
how do we move forward now?
How do we move forward? There's only one way to move forward, Eddie. There's a constitution. It is the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. It is the supreme law of our land. It means that this here is the law. If any law is inconsistent with this law, to the extent of its consistency, this law will prevail. And this constitution says very clearly in Article 106 that the cabinet, including the president, shall resign if the government is defeated by a vote of a majority of all the elected members of the National Assembly on the vote of no confidence. Now let's break it down. Were all the elected members present? Yes, they had 33, we had 32. They had some unelected members too, like Keith Scott and Felix and Sidney Ali Cock. They can't vote, but they were present that night. Did everybody vote? Yes, everybody voted. Was there a majority of all the elected members voting for it one way or the other? Yes. 33 members out of 65 voted that they had no confidence in the government. That article is satisfied. And then it goes on in sub-article 106.7 to say, notwithstanding its defeat, the government shall remain in office and shall hold an election within 3 months, 90 days, or such longer period as the National Assembly by a 2/3 majority shall dictate. Now, the Constitution is not a blank, insipid document. It says to us, listen, Guyana, if the government is to fall on a no confidence motion, we don't want you guessing what you must do next. You have to go to the election in 90 days, unless 2/3 of you in the House have come together and decided that 90 days is not enough. So we will make it 95 days, or we will make it 120 days, or 90 days is too long. So we're going to, you have to hold it within 90 days. So if you go past the 90 days, you need the 2/3 majority of the House, which means they would need PPP support. I think the leader of the opposition has been very clear that he's not closed to discussing matters of necessary matters. What is it that is needed? Can it be done in this time? And that he would not be entirely closed to give an extension of a couple of weeks, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. But of course, up to this afternoon, we hadn't been spoken to. As soon as the Speaker ruled, within a few hours this afternoon, the leader of the opposition had received a letter inviting him to meet with the President on the 9th, I believe, of January.
I want to take you forward now because clearly, based on the indications we're getting, they weren't able to derail the Speaker and get him to change anything. And I understand that already they would have moved to the courts and file matters relating, I think, first to Charandas's citizenship, and I think to prove somehow or the other, magically, I suspect that the 34 is needed. How do we move forward from here? Where does this put us as a nation? Bear in mind the Article 106 and 7 that you just read.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about Charandas's citizenship. Let's talk about that. I mean, it sounds ludicrous to you that people who took Charandas into the assembly, he was sitting with them. He voted, his vote was counted for 3 years to give them the majority. All of them know that he's a Canadian, or that he may have, I don't even know for sure that he does, but that he may have dual citizenship. They also know that that is true of many of their other members. They know that. Now, what does Article 165, again, our supreme law, what does it say? 165.2 says, the Assembly may, notwithstanding any vacancy in its membership, and the presence or participation of any person not entitled to be present or to participate in the proceedings of the Assembly, shall not invalidate those proceedings. So now let me explain what that means. If you were not supposed to be in the Assembly because you were ineligible in the first place, that means And there are articles that say people who have sworn allegiance to another country are not eligible to be in parliament. Now, this protects that. This says if you're sitting in the assembly and you participate in the assembly, in the proceedings of the assembly, or you're present at the assembly, the proceedings of that day, of those days, shall not be invalidated. What that means is, we might throw you out now, but anything you did before, it's saved.
Wow.
You understand? So it's very clear.
You should, this needs some more explaining so that people can understand, because I think they're trying to just dump this article on people and leave it like that.
Well, this is very, very clear, and it makes sense. Listen, when people draft laws, generally there's sometimes mistakes, which is why people have to go back and amend and so on. Most laws, you can find a mistake here or there, even if it's something as small as a comma left out. When people make laws, they consider all the circumstances that could be there. There could be a person who is bankrupt and nobody knows he's bankrupt. I think they might have one or two of those in their benches too. I'm not kidding, I'm dead serious. And they're sitting in the assembly. And they know they shouldn't be in the assembly, but other people don't know. So what does the Constitution say? If something like that happens, somebody who was ineligible in the beginning, ab initio, and is in the assembly and has participated in the proceedings of the assembly, those proceedings and that participation shall not be invalidated. So this is clear. This is very clear. So what Charan Das did that night, his vote, is as preserved as the vote he gave every single other time the assembly met, when he gave it in their favor.
We have just, probably about 3 minutes or so to go. So I
Sure.
want us to try to wrap this up quickly. I wish we had more time to continue here. But so this is where we at now.
Right.
What is your call to Guyanese? Because clearly we need to head to elections.
Like I said, it is extremely clear what needs to happen. We need to go to an election. This government, out of fear that it will lose its good life, out of fear that some of the corrupt activities they have been involved in, some of which we know, and they're being investigated now by the various bodies, the PPC and the Public Procurement Commission, and the Auditor General has exposed them several times, and other people have spoken up and anonymous letters have appeared. They know that they have been involved in massive corrupt activities. They know also that it's extremely difficult for them to win an election right now, and so everybody has to be vigilant. Every single Guyanese has to be an active citizen. You have to, this is, if there ever was a period for active citizenry, it is now. We must all raise our voices, whether on social media, whether in the newspapers, whether at the Coca Top, whether on the Coca Top when you gaffing in the afternoon, whether at the B-Ball Court, whether at the cinema when you go to visit, whether you go to shop on Regent Street, wherever it is you are, in your homes, at your dining tables, watching TV, wherever it is, you have to raise your voice and demand free and fair elections within the stipulated time. That is what is required of you. My friends, we will fight. We will fight for you. The PPP Civic, as it presently exists, as well as the one that is seeing, we are seeing a really pleasing thing happening. We're seeing a lot of people coming to us in this period and saying we want to be a part of your movement. Some people are saying, I don't want to join the party, I want to be civic, but I want to be a part of this movement. People who hitherto had not been politically inclined or had not been politically inclined in our direction. And so everybody has to be active now in calling, from young to old, in calling for a free and fair election within the stipulated time. Now, I see the Attorney General saying, I saw a news item as I was walking in here, that they're going to ask the court for a delay. Now, that alone speaks. That is really their intent. They want to delay these elections. I would expect that you would say you're going to ask the court for an interpretation of this matter. How are you going to the court before you even ask for that interpretation? And you're saying, I want an extension of 90 days. You don't know? The court could finish this in the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the CCJ within 21 days. That has happened in other countries where elections matters were being examined. And so their first thing is not to go and say, well, court, we're not too sure what majority means, and we're not too sure what happens if somebody's not, if somebody's a dual citizen. Could you please tell us? And then if time starts dragging on, then they ask for an order. They're going to the court first to ask for an extension of the 90 days. And by the way, could you find out about these things? So their entire thrust is really to delay the people of Guyana, giving the people of Guyana the opportunity to choose a government. Now, if you say you've done so well, and you have served all the various sectors, and you have done well in education and health and infrastructure and in the social services and with the farmers and with the cane cutters and agriculture, if you've done so well, then why are you so terrified of the electorate? Go to the electorate. We will go too, and that's where all things are equal, and everybody abides by the decision that the people make.
I want to thank you very much, Ms. Premanik Chan, for being here this evening. Of course, we were discussing this successful no confidence motion moved against the government. Quickly to recap, of course, today they had asked the Speaker to revisit his decision in terms of declaring the motion as passed, and he refused to do that. As a matter of fact, he encouraged that there be dialogue in preparations for elections, and of course, he advised them if they want to go to the court for interpretation, they're free to do so. So we're going to continue these discussions as we go along to keep you updated as to what is happening. Of course, we're in uncharted waters at this time in terms of what is happening in our country. Where
slightly the PPP gave up terms in office twice. In 97 and then in 2014 without a grumble, because we felt that it was the people's right to choose a government, and that we were confident that we had done enough to be able to win their support. And so in that regard, we're not in uncharted waters.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much, Ms. Manik
Well,
Chan.
thank you, Eddie, for having me.
This is where we're going to leave you now. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.